Hi, welcome to your first After Effects tutorial. This is going to be an introduction on the navigation, the tools, and the general user interface of After Effects. And in the meantime, I'm going to demonstrate how After Effects works in principle. So in front of me is a very complicated project. It's one of the personal works that we have shared with you as we were explaining what you're supposed to do in 2D animation for games. So let's get to it. After Effects, first and foremost, is basically a combination of a nonlinear video editor and Photoshop. So take Photoshop and bash it together with Premiere, a nonlinear video editor, and you get After Effects in principle. So it references outside information like other videos or images and stuff like that, and then you bring them together in a composition. So basically, instead of a canvas, instead of a new file, first of all, you have a project, and inside that project, you have compositions. Right now, there's a composition within this project open in front of me, and in it, you can see layers. These layers work just as they would in Photoshop, but in addition to their opacities, blending modes, any dynamic features like their positions in space, in this 2D space, and if you open up their three-dimensionality in 3D space as well, in addition to all of that transformation and effects properties, you also have the most important thing, their durations and their behavior throughout time. So basically speaking, you can animate all of the properties of an object, and you can animate like 99.99% of the properties of all effects throughout After Effects. Literally everything in this software is animatable. That's the purpose of it. And how you control this animation is through this timeline. And in here, you can see the results. And in here, you can see all of the objects that is being utilized in this project, whether they are called from outside or created within the software. Over here, we have the properties of any selected item. Okay? Normally, we don't use these. We utilize these drop-down menus for controlling everything. We have a list of effects and presets here. Some of these effects won't be available to you because I am using plugins in After Effects, so you won't have these. But the usual effects available in After Effects are more than enough to cover all of your needs in this project. Let's forget about libraries, we don't need that. And then we have the project tab here. This project tab, as I've explained, shows you all of the stuff in your project. And effects controls shows you a selected layer's effects if they have any. So let me try to find something with an effect on it. Oh, for example, here, cruise ship PNG. So this is a cruise ship PNG file. Let's find it. Like this. It is a cruise ship, image of a cruise ship with the background cut out. I did this in Photoshop. I went into Photoshop, found myself a nice picture of a cruise ship, and then just cut around it, saved it as a PNG so it becomes transparent or can carry transparency data, imported it into After Effects, and then used it as a layer inside my composition, which is right now named V11 main_02. Okay? So this is my composition name, and you can find it here. And you can use folders within your project to organize everything, which is going to be extremely important, and I'm going to also showcase what you're supposed to do as you're working on your files as well. This is not just about user interface, but how you're supposed to work in After Effects. So I positioned this cruise ship among many layers stacked on top of each other, And not only that, but I can set its duration so that before this point in time, it doesn't even exist, as you can see, right? It comes in, spawns almost, yeah, and then has an animation on top of it. And let's see the animation. If I go to its transform properties, you can see that its position and its rotation is animated with keyframes, okay? And then if you look at the effect controls, you can see it has a drop shadow effect on it. You remember drop shadow from Photoshop, I assume, if you used it, so that it drops a shadow on whatever layers are beneath it, okay? And then after it leaves the screen, it despawns because there's no more need for it. I don't want to overcomplicate things. If things don't appear on screen, I usually shorten them so that when they're supposed to leave or when they're supposed to disappear, they not only disappear within the frame, but also on my timeline as well. So I can track the progress of many different items. And literally every layer was hand positioned and hand animated throughout this project. You might be surprised to hear that fixing up this project, like completing it from start to finish with all of the research, the materials gathered, took as little time as like 30 to 40 hours, 30 to 40 hours of working time, not just daytime, but 30 to 40 hours of working time. I am an experienced motion designer, so it was easy for me. But when you get the hang of it, when you understand the software and how it works, it is really simple. A lot of the stuff you see on the screen are just a bunch of position animations, sliding left to right, just bobbing around, rotating a bit, sometimes disappearing, sometimes appearing. Like, for example, let's take a look at a bunch of tapes over here. These tapes, let me find you a better collection of those. Let me go over here. So as you can see, these tapes are not even animated. In order to replicate the stop motion action, for one frame, they're not in the scene, okay? And then the second, they spawn, and that's it. Okay, there's no more animation on top of them. So it's really doesn't matter what you're trying to accomplish. It's not about the complexity of animation. It's about the purpose of animation. I just wanted to replicate the effect of stop motion, like taking pictures of a scene progressing, evolving over time, as if I'm doing this on a tabletop, and I wanted to replicate that. So one scene, at one moment in time, there aren't any tapes, and then suddenly there are tapes, and that's it. And you do this long enough with interesting materials and an interesting concept, it is going to be an animation. We usually think of animation as like animating everything with great detail, and it has to be realistic and that sort of stuff. But no, it doesn't have to be. You can do very funky things without any effort in After Effects. Okay, so once again, to go over it, we have the project pane over here, includes everything, including the things that you have created inside After Effects over here. You have the effect controls. Effect controls controls the effects attached to any layers that you have positioned into your timeline. Think of this as your layer menu, let's say, but it's actually your composition menu. And that layer menu has a timeline slider attached next to it. Okay, we're going to go into more details in the bouncing ball tutorial. We have the properties over here. You don't have to use them. You can just use the properties from here. Okay, it's up to you. And there's an effects selection. Think about this as the filters list. There's an info pane over here that you can similarly use for taking a look at the colors and reading their values. And you have your toolbar over here. It's going to make more sense. This toolbar is going to make more sense once we start actually using the software. And then you have a bunch of menus over here, but most of the time you don't need any of that. You can just do it from the workspace. Okay? So before anything else, let's see what you're going to see when you first open up this software. Okay, let's close the project. Don't save it. So this is what you're going to be, introduced to when you first run the software. Now, there's nothing here, but we have to save it as a new project and then start playing around. Like in After Effects, it's not like Photoshop. You cannot just start painting and you cannot just start modeling like in Maya. You have to either create your workspace, create your intention first, like what kind of a video are you trying to make, what is the canvas size, what is going to be the video size. You have to set it up first, and then if you want to draw something on the screen, you can use vector shapes, or the more appropriate method would be exporting things from outside in, or importing them, in other words. So let's, for example, create a composition. If you click this icon or right click, hit new composition, or from here select new composition, shortcut Control N, you're going to create a new composition. A new composition is basically your video settings. So the purposes or the limitations, let's say, and the rules of this overall project will be HD 1080p, which is 1920 pixels by 1080 pixels. Okay, it is going to be in a 24 FPS frame base or frame rate. You can see it here, 24 frames per second. So 24 discrete images for every second. Obviously, we're using square pixels, and the resolution is full. Start time code, leave it at 0, and then the duration is, this is hours, minutes, seconds, and frames, and you're going to decide. Like composition durations can be adjusted on the fly. You can just as easily extend the duration of the composition by just going into its settings. I mean, you can practically adjust any of these values as you're working on your project. So these are not final or anything. Maybe your composition needs more space at the end. You can just go up to its settings and extend it to whatever you need. For now, 10 seconds is good. And since this is base 24, so for example, if I were to type 25 here and hit enter, since this is base 24, oops, I didn't mean to do that. It is going to go back to 11 seconds and 1 frame, because 24 frames is 1 second. Okay, so let's shorten this to just 10 seconds. Okay, and you can name your composition over here. Always name your composition. Hit OK. Okay, so congratulations, you have a new composition. Let me call this my first comp. Comp is short for composition. It is After Effects nomenclature. Hit OK. Okay, so when you double click on it, you can go see this composition. As of right now, there's nothing inside of it as I expected. Okay, and if you want to create something in it without importing any stuff over here, you can use the vector tools similar to Photoshop and much more simpler than what you have available in Adobe Illustrator. If you're using Illustrator, if you're fond of it, you'll find that it speaks really well with Illustrator, After Effects. Or if you have used vector tools in Photoshop, you will feel right at home. No worries. And you can start drawing stuff on the screen. Okay? And then you can decide on its properties. Okay? Let's do this. There you go. We have a shape on the screen. And it has turned itself into a shape layer. Now, a shape layer will not appear in your project tab, because this is dedicated to this software only. It is not a referenced object, and it doesn't make sense outside of this area. So it can only exist as a layer. It cannot be exported as an object. A composition, on the other hand, it has to exist in your project, because there's a very good trick in After Effects, and you will use it in the future as you're working on your project, is that you can nest compositions. So I can, for example, create a new composition and say, let's make this my first pre-comp. We call this pre-composition. Okay, let me underscore it so it's better visible. And let's keep this 500 pixels by 500 pixels. Same 24 frame base. And we don't need like 10 seconds. Let's go with 1 second. Doesn't matter. Okay, and here it is, my first pre-comp. It is just another composition. There's nothing special about it aside from how I named it. Okay, and then I'm going to create a new, let's say, solid. Okay, and this is going to be a white solid, automatically named because of the color. Let's make it something different, like yellow. Okay, and it automatically names it yellow solid. You can name it anything you want. Okay, once again, units, pixels, square pixels, hit OK. There you go. This is a yellow solid. And its length is as lengthy as the composition itself, but you can extend it. Okay, you can extend it as long as you want. Images are not videos, so they appear on screen just as they are. And their durations aren't determined by the duration like in a video. An image can appear infinitely. Okay, a video is going to be as long as the video itself. But images, well, images don't have that limitation. Okay, a yellow solid basically is a dynamic image. Okay, so we have a composition with a yellow box almost inside of it. If I go over here and drag my pre-comp into here, now my first pre-comp is located as a layer inside of this, inside of my first comp. And whatever changes I make over here, so let me go over here and just draw this, it is going to automatically update in here as well. So why do we use this? For example, imagine that you are doing a character animation, a walk cycle, let's say. In a walk cycle, you only have to animate as long as the cycle itself. Like, let's say it takes 2 seconds to do a basic stride. Okay, 1 step forward, another step forward, and that's it. It loops. You do that as a composition, and you import it in here. You can set it to loop, and because of that, if you, not freeze, but loop it, and I'm going to show you that to you later, you can infinitely have your character walk by repeating the same composition over and over again. And you don't have to go over many of the different layers that might make up your character animation. They will be located inside another pre-composition, so they will appear very neat as a single layer over here. And you can do this as much as you like, as deep as you like. You can nest compositions inside compositions, and you can nest those compositions inside other compositions. This is called nesting and pre-composing. So this is how basically After Effects works, and you can, use all of these effects from here. And like I mentioned before, everything is dynamic, and usually discovering these might take a really long time. So a better option would be to write your intentions over here. Chances are there's an effect attached to it. For example, you want to create shadows. You want to put shadows to an object. You want them to drop shadows. So let's add a drop shadow. Or just type in shadow, and you're going to get many different settings. Now, BCC, these are plugins, so you won't see them in yours. But here I have a drop shadow. So if I drag it to my pre-comp, okay, now over at the effect controls, I will see the drop shadow effect. Okay, now I can adjust it however I wish, change the direction of the light, set the distance, okay, maybe over here, adjust its softness, and take a look. Like literally every value here has a stopwatch sign next to it. A stopwatch sign is dedicated to animation. If you turn on the stopwatch sign, let's do just that. Let's, for example, adjust the softness of it. And if I go to over here to Effects, Drop Shadow, you can see the stopwatch sign is turned blue, And right now there is a keyframe on the very first frame of this composition. The frame 0 has this keyframe, okay? And you are on it, as you can see. If I move over, it's going to turn to gray. If I go over here, it's going to turn into blue. Right now the softness is set to 98. And since there are no other keyframes in here, it's not going to do anything. But if I go over here and set it to 50, now it is going to interpolate between these two values. It is going to gradually go from 98 to 50 until here. If you click on this graph editor, you can see the translation, the transformation of this property. Okay? It goes from 98 to 50. And then this value continues on to infinity because there are no other values attached here. It is going to keep this value infinitely unless you, for some reason, change the value over here, and then it is going to put an automatic keyframe at that location. Okay? But it doesn't matter right now because, as you can see, my composition isn't that long. This composition was set to 1 second, remember? So maybe I need more time. Now I can go to my pre-comp and extend this duration. Let's go over to project, right click on the pre-comp, go to composition settings, and set it to 5 seconds. And now we have 5 seconds available. Zoom out using this icon over here, and as you can see, my composition has a new length, 5 seconds. That's good, but when I come over here, it still don't appear. What if I do this? 5 seconds. It still won't appear. Why? Because over in my pre-composition, these layers, the shape layer and the yellow solid, they were short. They were set to 1 second. So I need to extend them as well. Okay? Now if I go over here, there you go. My yellow box is now set to 5 seconds. Okay? And I can adjust these values however I wish. If I want to remove a keyframe, I can just select it and delete it. Okay? Or I can put a keyframe over here without changing the value. Okay? Or I can remove a keyframe from over here, but it's going to reset to the interpolated position. It's going to lose that value after all. Control Z works. Okay? So let's do 0. This is 50. Let's do 75. So as you can see, I am drawing a graph basically. And if I hit space, which is the shortcut for playback, it is going to play back all of this scene. There you go. Good. And you can scrub the timeline to see what's what. So yeah, this is how After Effects works, basically speaking. There's not much to it. You have to use your own imagination, you have to use your own creativity. There isn't many controls over here, but the rest I will explain in the tutorial for bouncing ball. Well, see you in that tutorial then.